Now that we have examined the Caeretan hydria in great detail, as well as the Campana slabs, the question arises, of course, of, well, okay, these are Ramayana scenes. We can concede that, but how do you prove that they even knew about this legend in the first place? I mean, how did the Oriental legend of Ramayana from travel from India to Etruria? It's an excellent question, and one that is not possible to answer within the scope of this presentation. But I can touch upon it briefly and try to explain how it happened on a high level. So, this process of transmission of the Ramayana, it happened during the 550 BC to 500 BC range. That is the latter half of the 6th century. And that was when the Persian Achaemenid Empire had stretched itself from Ionia to India, to the borders of northwest India. And that's, in essence, what allowed the epic Ramayana to be told for the first time to Europeans in the Mediterranean world. And this process is not as certain or as easy to describe in detail because it's not been documented that well, given that it's over 2,500 years old. But we do have documentation of the fact that the Valmiki Ramayana was transmitted to China and many Southeast Asian countries about 1,500 to 2,000 years ago. And these Southeast Asian countries are numerous. They include Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Burma, and Indonesia. And if it could travel 2,000 years ago to these Southeast Asian and East Asian countries, then it definitely could travel far westward as well. So if it could travel far eastward from India, then it surely could also have traveled far westward. It's only because of the superiority complex of Europeans that it's not something they're willing to even admit could have happened. You know, generally speaking, the classical scholars like to emphasize how the Greeks influenced the Persians and the Indians, and not the other way around. And that is part of the Eurocentric bias that I've been talking about. And if you look at the quote from Margaret Miller below, from her book Athens and Persia, A Study in Cultural Receptivity, she notes the peaceful conditions that were helpful to trade that pertained under the new empire, the Achaemenid Persian Empire, starting around 530 BCE, which just happens to coincide with the starting date of the Caeretan workshop that produced all these hydriae. So, in my opinion, there's too much emphasis on the Greek influence on the Asian countries rather than the other way around. And I think that that's again part of the problem with the effects of colonialism and the way the modern world is structured, with the Western world being more materially advanced. To continue our conversation about the transmission of the Ramayana via the Persian Empire, I want to present this graphic, which comes from Lindsay Allen's book, The Persian Empire. And in it, you can see the roads that were existing at that time in the 6th century BC that allowed the Indians to communicate the story all the way to the borders, the Mediterranean borders of Ionia. And if you look at it, you can see the roadways connecting from the Indus River Valley in the region of Gandhara and Bactria all the way to Lydia and Caria and Lycia, and as well as other parts of Ionia, including Phocaea, where the artists of the Caeretan hydria probably came from. To make this more specific, the Indians communicated the story of Valmiki's Ramayana to the Ionians, specifically the Phocaeans in all probability, who then told it in Etruria. The Persian Empire reached northwest India, Gandhara, Taxila, or what is known as Taxila. These areas of northwest India are where the myth of Rama and Sita were probably told by bards, and this included the Golden Deer episode, which then likely traveled all the way to the western coast of Asia Minor, that is Ionia. And Hemmelrich in his book states, I take it that the two master painters of our hydria left East Greece, Phocaea that is, before the age at which they would become adult ceramicists. The refugees from Asia Minor fleeing from the Persians in the 40s of the 6th century, who wanted to found a new home in Corsica, must have been about the best educated people of the time. And among them, we gather, our painters grew up. This explains their great interest in literature and mythology. So this is certainly a very dense explanation and detailed one of the education of the painters, and also how well informed they were, and also why they were leaving potentially from Asia Minor, and when they were leaving as well in the 40s of the 6th century. So there's a lot of detail here. Some of it is not necessarily correct, because in my opinion the idea that Ionian artists were fleeing the tyranny of the Persian oppressors is only one possibility. It is also just as possible that stable conditions around 540 to 530 BCE, which Margaret Miller hints at in the previous slide, those stable conditions around 540 to 530 BCE may have allowed safe travel and secure trade for the Phocaean immigrants to explore new business opportunities and settle themselves in a land with more hope for a higher quality of life. This is a hypothetical situation, of course, but it does resemble contemporary times. People in the 20th century have immigrated to America, not necessarily to escape tyranny, but often simply for a chance at a better life. So what I'm saying here is that there could be a variety of reasons why they immigrated from Asia Minor all the way to Caere in Etruria. But suffice to say, they did immigrate, that's for sure, and they did it early on in the latter half of the 6th century. And they were very well educated, and they clearly knew about a great variety of myths in literature, not just in Greek, not just in the Greek world, but even outside of the Greek world. Now that we have explained how the Ramayana was transmitted to Etruria, the next question would be, well, why did the Etruscans embrace the story of Rama and Sita in the first place? In my opinion, the Etruscans could relate to the ancient Indians and their epic story, even though they were not related at all to them ethnically, racially, linguistically, etc. So they didn't have any biological relationship with them, but that's not how they related to them and their epic story. So how could they relate to the main protagonists, Rama and Sita? I think one needs only to view the great works of art depicting the happily married couples enjoying the afterlife together, which you can see in the Villa Giulia Museum in Rome, including the famous sarcophagus of the spouses, which also comes from Caere. And you just need to see those works of art to see how the Etruscans must have valued the Indian paragon of faithful spouses, Rama and Sita. They definitely put an emphasis on marriage between man and woman and the marital bliss in their art. So the next point would be, well, I believe the Etruscans saw nobility and strength in the story of the Ramayana, as well as great drama, especially in the abduction scene of Sita, which was clearly one of their favorites. And I think the popularity of the narrative of satyrs chasing maenads and hunting animals such as deer made it easy for this part of the story to become accessible and convertible into a medium that was understandable to the native population in the Mediterranean world. So it was easy to translate this part of the story, the Golden Deer episode, into a form that was, going to become very popular in the Mediterranean. And the third point would be that Rama's qualities of self-restraint, valor, and loyalty were unparalleled in the Indian lore. And the Etruscan kings, or the aristocrats, you could say, in Rome and in Caere, likely wanted to emulate these traits. And that's what explains the somber and devotional tone that you see in the Campana plaques. The fourth point would be that the Etruscans, being socially isolated from the rest of the world, because they were speaking a language that was not part of any major family, Semitic or Indo-European. They were not speaking a language that was Semitic or Indo-European. The Etruscans probably had an unusually strong desire to learn about other cultures and their mythical stories. The tomb also was the perfect storage house for preserving the relics of their far-ranging interests. I think all of these factors contributed to the survival of amazing artifacts that allow us to peer into a mostly undocumented and shadowy period in human history. Therefore, why don't we celebrate rather than doubt the embrace of Indian influence by Etruscan aristocrats of the 6th century? The Etruscan scholar Jean McIntosh Turfa explains this Etruscan embrace of Oriental cultures in 3 words. She calls it the cosmopolitan inquiring spirit of the Etruscans, which is a great way to summarize who they are. Another comment I want to make is that we should not be surprised that the Etruscans preserved artistic works depicting the Ramayana better than the Indians themselves were able to do. Because even if we look at the modern world of today, one could very much argue that the traditions of yoga and even the health system of Ayurveda are better preserved in the Western world than they are in India itself, and will continue to trend in that direction. Regarding preservation, the photos you see here of the Campana slabs, both on the left and the right, you can see a clear distinction between the color and black and white photos. And furthermore, we don't have any corresponding color photos for the Caeretan hydria in Boston, like we do for these Campana slabs. Even the color photos that you see here that we have of the Campana series are often inferior in quality. So if you look at the bottom left, you'll see that the black and white image of Rama and Sita and Lakshman walking forward is quite a bit better than the color image. And also on the right-hand side here, we have the 5th Campana slab that we have yet to analyze. And the main reason is that, unfortunately, part of it is broken off, and so we don't have the face of the lady completely painted and depicted. But I think the most likely explanation for this one is that it's just a romantic scene between Rama and Sita while they were during their stay in the forest. So it's not as important as the other 4 slabs, but definitely seems to be a continuation of the slab on the left, where Rama and Sita and Lakshman are walking in the forest. Here, it's probably the 2 of them just casually relaxing, while during their time in exile. Also, I want to add that the scholar Mario del Chiaro noticed that there were essentially congruent profile heads exhibited by the women depicted on 3 of the Campana panels, including this last panel here, which is broken off. And that indicates clearly that Sita is being depicted in 3 of the scenes, in all 3 scenes. There are also 3 congruent profile heads of Rama in the Campana panels, including these 2 scenes that you can see on this slide, where you have Rama holding bow and arrows on the leftmost slab, as well as on this broken slab where he's unarmed and enjoying a romantic moment with his wife. You can see the same shape of the beard, the same type of eyes and facial appearance, and long hair. And, and you also see a gesture with the right hand as well in both. So, and similar clothing. They really are the same person on 3 of the slabs, including the other one where he's rescuing Sita. In that one, there's 2 versions of Rama. The one on the leftmost side is also bearded, just like these 2 characters here. So there are actually 3 congruent profile heads for Sita and for Rama in the Campana slabs. That really confirms that these are the 2 most important characters that are featured on these Campana panels. I think that people should petition the Boston Museum of Fine Arts to put the Caeretan hydria number 2 with the Boston deer hunt on display so that people can look at it in color and also take photos, of course, but especially to be able to view it and see it in its full glory and really judge for themselves what they think it is. We actually do have reproductions of the Campana slab paintings at the Bologna Etruscan Museum, which is, in the northern part of Tuscany. And these provide more visual evidence of the Valmiki Ramayana through these modern renditions where the characters are restored and the painting is restored to what it may have been originally. So if we examine these modern renditions, these reproductions in Bologna, we see that in the bottom left corner, from left to right, we can see that in the bottom left, King Dasharath is again seated with his preceptor Vashishta, with Caere flying over to intervene, and you can see her right hand raised to interfere with what they were discussing. Then in the middle we have the Rama and Sita and Lakshman walking close together, both in the top and bottom photos. They're the photos of the same picture, of the same artwork that's been reproduced. And on the bottom right, you have Bharat performing penances in solitude at a fire altar. So that's the bottom right. And then on the top right corner, you can see Rama again carrying his wife back home as a triumphant hero. I want to give a brief overview of some of the speculative interpretations of these Campana plaques. The Etruscan researchers have come to conclusions that reflect both their ignorance of the actual myth from the Ramayana and also their sporadically correct observations of the characters' general roles. So the first quote I'm going to give you is correct, actually. It's a correct statement, and it's found in the book Etruscan Art by Otto Brendel. He writes that evidently 5 of the slabs formed part of a continuous decoration, meaning that they formed a connected narrative. And definitely this is a statement that I agree with, and it refutes the published views of the Louvre Museum that we discussed earlier. But the problem is that Otto Brendel incorrectly guesses the meaning of the three main Campana slabs. He writes that in one slab, one may identify Iphigenia led to her sacrifice by two men carrying weapons. So instead of it being Sita and Rama and Lakshman leading her in the front and back, it's instead Iphigenia being led to a sacrifice by two nondescript men. But clearly, these two men are not nondescript. They're clearly great heroes, just like the two youths in the Caeretan hydria. So we can refute that one right away. Now, the next statement is, in another slab, he says that Calchas the seer and King Agamemnon seated, deliberating about the means of reconciling the offended goddess, Artemis. So you can see that he does come close here in the sense that he identifies that one is a king and one is a seer, just like King Dashrath and the seer Vashishta. So conceptually he's right, but the characters he's gotten wrong because of the obsession with trying to fit this forcibly into some kind of Greek myth. And the last statement is, in the abduction scene, Iphigenia may again be recognized, this time rescued from the sacrificial altar by Apollo with bow and arrows, which would be the left figure, and then Artemis, who's the winged figure in his eyes, who carries her away through the air. Now, there is one, problem with this which is pretty glaring, and Warren G. Moon, which is the next quote that I'll give you, he observes in his book Ancient Greek Art and Iconography that Artemis is identified as the winged figure in Brendel's book, even though her flesh is not painted white, as is Iphigenia's. And this observation is critical because it proves that the character is not female like Artemis, but is male with a tanned face and a shaven face. But if you look at the skin color, and I think we've discussed this earlier, that the females tend to be painted lighter skinned or fairer skinned than the male characters. And if you again look at any of the Campana plaques, you'll see that Rama is depicted with a darker skin and Sita is depicted with fairer skin. So this statement or this opinion that it's Artemis who's the winged figure just simply does not accord with the reality that it's a male figure, clearly because of the tanned color of the face. Now, that's wrong, yes, but he's got that wrong, but he has gotten something right here, and that's the fact that he realizes that Iphigenia, who is really Sita, is again recognized a second time. So he recognizes that the same character is being depicted, in two different Campana slabs. And that's exactly what I've been talking about with not only the Campana slabs, but also the Caeretan hydria, that Sita is the Maeanid in both scenes, on the left and right, on the reverse side of the hydria. So he does get that right. He does realize that the same female character is being depicted twice. I wanted to finish our discussion about the Campana slabs with a presentation of two Indian counterparts to two of the main Campana slabs that are not exactly the same, but are definitely similar to the two Campana slabs in which Rama and Sita and Lakshman are walking in the forest, and the other Campana slab where Rama is carrying Sita in the sky as a winged figure. So on the left-hand side, we see here the royal bird, the divine bird Garuda, carrying the divine couple, Vishnu and Lakshmi. Now, Rama and Sita are earthly incarnations of these two Hindu gods, Vishnu and Lakshmi, respectively. And you can see them smiling at each other while flying in the sky in this painting on the left. And the book In the Realm of Gods and Kings, Arts of India, they describe this scene in more detail. They say Garuda, the divine bird, bears Vishnu with his consort Lakshmi in stately flight. And Vishnu holds a bow and arrow, just like Rama. And the divine couple here gaze at one another with serene devotion. And we can see that even in the Campana plaque with Sita gazing at her husband and hero, Rama, with that same kind of serene devotion. Now on the right-hand side, we see another Bengali folk painting depicting Rama and Sita in the middle and Lakshman walking behind them through the forest. And what you will notice is that Lakshman is the one holding the leaf this time over their heads to protect them probably from the rain or whatnot. And as you can see, it's very similar to the Campana slab again. It's just, again, the variation is in the person who is holding the leaf or flower. It could be Rama, it could be Sita, it could be, Rama or Sita or Lakshman himself. So it could be any one of the three characters holding the leaf or flower or branch, signifying that they are walking through the wilderness. And you can also see the design of green leaves on the top of the painting as well, just like the lotus palmettes in the Caeretan hydria.